Hi, my name is Ben, or you may know me from Twitter as @lolworlds, and I'm back with my second analysis video. I will just outline what I will go through in this video and get right to it. I'm going to be talking about the pick ban strategies from Game 1 of TSM versus World Elite at IEM World Championships in Katowice, and my analysis of the mentality and strategy that went into these pick ban phases. And after the initial phase is finished, I will give an overview of each team's compositions and win conditions, and lastly, my opinion on which team should be the favorite based on my analysis of how the compositions match up. So we'll start with World Elite's bans here. So we have the Z takeaway from Bjergsen. I think he showed potential to outplay almost anyone on that champion. I think something to highlight before I go further into this is that something that you'll see in a lot of pick ban strategies is that the blue side will often ban out the strong, counterable solo laners. The idea being that you don't want the red side to have the chance to last pick these in a favorable situation. Zed is a great example of this. So if you can get Zed into a good mid lane or a good comp for him to go up against, he can be absolutely devastating. And in contrast to this, you'll often see on the red side, most bans will just be like safe, normally jungle or support picks. Since these are often, fairly easy first picks for blue side with no real counters, which is what blue side, these are the advantage for blue side. The second ban is Lulu. So this has been a great pick for TSM, not just in terms of flex, but also just because Lulu really has been really good in so many compositions. And if you put it in the top lane, she can fit into all of these comps as long as her lack of damage is made up elsewhere. Her damage does fall off a little bit. She can be a lane bully against most champions, but her damage will scale off. But if you can compensate for that, she can really fit into absolutely any comp. She just has so much utility. And the last ban for World Elite is Victor. So I just think that they saw Bjergsen's Victor, they probably haven't played against it much, so they're afraid of it. That's fair enough. He really can be a huge lane bully, and not only does he have really good harass and trading potential as a lane bully, but also great wave clear. So he ticks all the boxes in terms of being a really good 1v1 champion, and this is something they didn't want to give Bjergsen, which makes sense, him being TSM's strongest player. Now, I found it interesting that they would bother with just the 2 bans on Bjergsen, funnily enough. You might think this is a lot, but I think they might have wanted to ban either Ahri or LeBlanc as well, because now Bjergsen is pretty much guaranteed to get either of them. If you were going to ban only 2, then you would pick LeBlanc, right? Because she goes well against Ahri, and she also does well against the other viable mid lane picks that are left, like Xerath and Ezreal. These things you just really don't want to pick into a LeBlanc. We have seen Bjergsen pick Xerath into LeBlanc once before. There is some skill in it. You can, much like with Ahri against LeBlanc, if you can land skill shot CC as she distortions into you, then you can win trades, but very, very skill-based and much harder for the defender. So yeah, I thought maybe ban Ahri, maybe ban LeBlanc, then pick the other. Or if you were going to go with this strategy, then you would be first picking LeBlanc, but they demonstrated that was not their intention, which I thought it should have been. Alright, we'll look at TSM's bans now. So we start with Rek'Sai. I thought this was a little bit of a strange ban, considering Spirit has pretty much demonstrated that he will pick Jarvan into anything. He'll pick it blind if it's open, and I guess the only way I can reason this is that they would want to take Rek'Sai away just on the off chance that World Elite play it rather than Jarvan. But really, I would be expecting TSM to know that World Elite are going to pick Jarvan if he's open. So I guess they just want to force him onto that champion so that they're guaranteed to know what they're playing against, which is... there's some logic to that, but pretty meager. Okay, the next ban we look at is Maokai. This has been one of Aluka's staples. Safe champion, safely lane swap when he needs to. He can be tanky in the mid game by going for that build where you sit on the Catalyst and build the resist items like Spectre's Cowl and Warden's Mail. Or you can go for the really high scaling build with the Rod of Ages. So he's got so much versatility. You can always rely on him to be tanky because his ultimate and his passive give him so much innate tankiness. And he's got such reliable CC. So really good pick in this meta. Really good ban to take it away from Aluka. Totally agree with that one. The Morgana ban, on the other hand, I'm not really sure about. I would have thought Janna would be a higher priority ban. This seemed like a bit of a throwaway. I mean, they did win one game against GE with it, but they also won the other game with Janna. So that hardly gives that theory any credence. So not really sure about the Morgana ban. I would have thought Janna would just be a better ban. So TSM's bans overall, a little bit nothing. I thought they would target Xier more. They pretty much just ignored him. But I mean, World Elite already banned out 2 mid laners themselves. But they're not the ones that Xier is known for. He's known for these assassin mages, not stuff like Zed and Victor, which are 2 of the strongest mids right now. That Bjergsen is strong on as well. I feel like I mentioned it many times now, but I think Janna just would have been a better takeaway. The other possibility was for them to further target Aluka, who has been, I would perceive him as the weak point for World Elite. So perhaps ban out his only other strong champion, in my opinion, which has been his Scion. Or take it away early. I mean, you don't really expect World Elite to first pick it, so maybe take it away early, but that was definitely not a strategy they could have gone with. Or take away more playmaking champions from Spirit, but the problem is he's got so many, right? I mean, are you going to take away the Lee Sin? Are you going to take away the Jarvan? Are you going to take away all these champions? He's played Olaf, hasn't he? Rengar, he can play everything, so that seems like a losing battle. Alright, we'll go into the first pick for World Elite. What a surprise. The Instalock Jarvan. But I really do think that World Elite have drastically overrated him on this patch. He lost a lot of early game tankiness with his recent nerf. I really think Nidalee should be a higher priority pick. But if you aren't comfortable blind picking her, then perhaps Janna. Of course, the possibility remains to first pick the Scion, but teams generally aren't that willing to first pick solo lanes, unless they're super brave. Which I think for good reason most players aren't. But I think he is fairly reliant on these full tank picks, where he's initiating. He doesn't have to worry too much about his positioning. Twisted Advance basically positions yourself for you, even so. I think if Scion were a flex jungle pick, it may be a more serious consideration, but you would normally expect that pick anyway, so, okay. Alright, let's go into the second rotation for TSM. That is indeed the lock-in. Let's drop back a little bit. Alright, here. So, TSM, 2 great picks. Love these picks. LeBlanc, Sivir. 2 picks we know TSM for, and for good reason. So LeBlanc is one of Bjergsen's best champions. Does well against the expected Ahri pick from Xier. And also, I think she actually benefits a lot from these bans. I'm not sure if that's by design or by happenstance, because World Elite certainly could have picked a LeBlanc, in which case TSM would, I think, be on the back foot. Although I know Bjergsen, he could play other champions against it, but I think it just works out well that champions with shields like Morgana and Lulu are off the table when LeBlanc is picked, so that's a good thing. Also, Maokai is pretty good against LeBlanc. Zed lanes well against LeBlanc. All these things mean that LeBlanc is a really good pick here. So many counters. Not really counters, but just things that can make her life a bit more difficult are off the table. So it is worth noting that it has been said before that TSM does better when they put Bjergsen on a more supportive style champion to protect Wild Turtle. However, I would say that that's not really in line with the TSM we know now. I actually think that they have strengthened their other compositions, at least in the context of NA, which is really all we have to go off. So I think we're looking at definitely an improved TSM from their previous iteration. The Sivir pick, great pick for Wild Turtle. I think he's a very one-dimensional AD carry in terms of his play, and he only goes in and he goes hard. That's the only way he goes. I mean, you see that he does it on Tristana, he does it on Lucian. He just likes to be at the front, dealing more damage at the risk of his own life. This can be a strength, it could be a weakness, depending on how you use it in the situation, but Sivir gives him the best opportunity to just run at the enemy team with his team right next to him, so it really stylistically matches well with his playstyle. So pretty happy with those picks, as you can probably tell. So let's go on to World Elite. That is not what they picked. Alright, so here we have the Janna and Ahri. So I like the Janna pickup. Maybe even more priority being placed on it, but it's always nice to have a shielding support against LeBlanc after the others have been taken away. And taking the Janna away from Sivir can also be important, since those two movement speed boosts, they can create for a pretty nasty engage for a team. There isn't really any innate synergy with Jarvan. Some might even say that it's a little bit contradictory in plan, but these two champions normally go well together just because of the raw power. They're such strong champions in that they do what they do so well. They fulfill the role that they're meant to, just better than any other, and that's why they've been picked so much. Now, the Ahri pick, I actually think this shows off a little bit of a lack of champion pull from Xi'an. Admittedly, there were several mid-bans already, but Ahri really has no place here. She simply doesn't have a good matchup against LeBlanc. She isn't the best at assassinating Sivir, because spell shields are really good against the slow projectile CC, which Ahri is reliant on, especially in a teamfight context. In a 1v1 context, Ahri doesn't need to land charm to kill Sivir, really. Okay, so if he wasn't nerfed here, I would definitely say Kassadin. But okay, why even mention him? But otherwise, I would say maybe go back to something like Orianna. Might be my recommendation. The reason being that she can actually do quite well in lane against LeBlanc, since you can put more points into the shield if you need it. She goes well with Jarvan, creating huge epic wombo combos, but more likely just catch a couple of people, really. That's not bad. Unfortunately, the reason Orianna has fallen out of favor is that people are trending a lot more to mid-game focused compositions where you just don't want to be behind in the early game. And Orianna doesn't offer anything in the early game. I mean, she needs a lot of time to ramp up her skills, mana, AP. So I understand why stylistically World Elite would shy away from a late game style. Since especially in China, this mid-game focus has been extremely prevalent. But, I mean, if it were my team and my mid could play Orianna, this would probably be my suggestion. Just some different context, but the current situation, I understand why the Ahri was picked. I just think it's a bit unfortunate in the situation. I don't think it works out very well. Just theoretically, not even referring to what happens in the game. Okay, so TSM's next rotation of picks, they go with Vi. So Vi goes very well with what TSM are already going with. She provides surefire initiation when Sivir uses her ultimate. Also amazing pick potential with LeBlanc. And she also does better than most initiators against Janna. Reason being that her ultimate's unstoppable, right? It's similar to like Hecarim, Malphite, Jarvan to a degree. All these champions, they can go in, they can't be stopped. really good against teams that want to cut you back a little bit. The Annie pick is really just pouring it on here. Just layering on the initiation. So it's interesting to note here, I think that TSM, what they did was they recognized that Shia was the main carry of World Elite. While I would say Spirit has been the best player, he has actually played more of a supportive role in this iteration of the comp. Iteration of the lineup, rather. Which makes sense considering Ninja was always more of a backline poke-oriented player, playing champions, like Xerath, Jace. These are champions we know him for. But Jia plays more of the Dade style that Spirit is used to, rather. Someone who just initiates, goes hard, really plays that carry style. They're really interested in getting into the fights, making the plays, not worrying too much if they die because they know that their team can clean up just by them dealing huge amounts of sheer damage. We're going back to what TSM have picked. They picked the Annie, and Vi really, it emphasizes like this instant CC, right? This targeted. You're not relying on any skill shots here. You just the RE, she ults in. You instantly have things to click on her with. So their ability to shut her down if she gets ahead in the early game is really there. Alright, so I'm pretty happy how it's going so far. Big ban anyway. Just have a look. Alright, this is what World Elite go with. Next, they choose to go with the Ezreal and Sion. So Ezreal is a safe pick, but I feel it leaves World Elite a little bit lacking in the damage department, especially given TSM's ability to lock down one of World Elite's carries. In nearly any circumstance, really. I understand they didn't want an immobile carry against the Vi, but I really think Corki would have been better off just to give them more damage. He's a bit less safe, and he doesn't lane well against Sivir, so I just think picking him, lane swapping, go for that mid-game power spike, I think that they would have been better off there, but I understand them if they don't want to lane swap, then Corki is probably the better pick, but you can have a weak bot lane as well. Alright, then we see the Sion pick. So, I mean, this seemed like a sure thing for Aluka, really. I haven't been impressed with his play on any other champions, really. His Hecarim play, for example, I wasn't really impressed. Maybe they were thinking they wanted to put him on it again, but he wasn't happy to pick a blind. I just think you were probably always going to be picking your top laner blind here, just because TSM picked the mid lane early, so they're probably delaying their top lane pick. Because, you always get to counter at least one lane with your last pick as red side, so you would expect them to save that for the top lane. But Sion is a fine blind pick. You can pick him into any matchup. I think they probably should have picked him early. Maybe instead of the Ahri. If Shia had like some special mid lane pick, I have no idea what, to pick against the LeBlanc, maybe they could have saved that for later. But obviously it wasn't there. Alright, we go into the last pick. Not that. Come on, last boy. There we go. Okay. So the last pick for TSM is Rumble. So I think this is a fine pick. It gives TSM fairly balanced damage on their comp. I think, to be fair though, almost any top lane pick would be okay here since they already have enough engage. I'm not a big fan of Rumble versus Ezreal Ahri since they can get off the equalizer fairly easily, but perhaps TSM were relying on stacking it on top of the Assault and Battery and Tibbers to hold World Elite in place for it to deal enough damage, which I think is justification enough. The only other considerations for top lane, I think, would have been something like there's Lysandra, Dr. Mundo, and Hecarim, really. So we think about Lysandra here. She would fit very much with TSM's comp. It's more of the same thing, right? It's just like another Vi. It's another Addy. It's that lock up for the two carry style that World Elite is going with. Problem is, I think that TSM's damage would be a bit low. I think Rumble provides more of that, more sustained damage. I said this in my previous video. Mundo also provides more sustained damage than Lissandra, in my opinion. And also, I would say Hecarim definitely does. They're all reasonable picks, but I don't think Darius has been playing Hecarim. I like the Rumble over Lissandra, so I think that's fair. And the Dr. Mundo pick, I think it's okay, but if Ezreal goes for the blue build, then Dr. Mundo can be rendered fairly ineffective. He is actually pretty good at shredding down Sion, surprisingly enough. His cleavers, really, that percentage health damage can really go a long way to chunking down tanks pretty fast in a teamfight scenario. So if you don't have the damage to kill Mundo, he can eventually kill your whole team. But I think the Rumble pick is fine. Also, Dyrus is certainly one of his comfort picks, right? We know he's picked this champion so much. Okay, so we'll have a look at the overview of the compositions now. We have a look at World Elite. They have Aluka on Sion, Spirit on Jarvan, Xia on Ahri, Mystic on Ezreal, Yuja on Janna. So World Elite have a strong grouped 5v5 comp for the late, mid-game, and late game, where they can AoE their abilities for maximum damage. If they aren't able to properly chain their abilities, I do think that their damage is quite lacking. They also have a weak early game with passive bot and mid lanes. They lack kill pressure or pushing power on their lane opponents, even with the presence of their jungler. So given all these factors, I'll now explain how I think that they should try and play out the game. So I think that they definitely have the scaling advantage. They have the hyper tank Sion, and TSM don't have a tank. So anytime there's a matchup like that where there's a hyper tank versus non-hyper tank team, you would favor the tank team in the late game. You know, unless you're up against stuff like real tank killers like Vayne or maybe Kog'Maw. I wouldn't be looking for mid-game skirmishes against the Rumble. I would instead try to extend the laning phase as much as possible. And if TSM do group for objectives, try to contest as little as possible until you hit your power spike, which is really predicated on Ezreal's items more than anyone else. So if he hits his 3-item power spike, or his 2 and 3 item power spikes are pretty nice. So Muramana Triforce, Last Whisper, are 3 pretty key points for him. So if they just group and you don't want to fight, just push the lanes. I mean, that's the best you can do, really. I would say if they wanted to gank, top lane would be their best target. Reason being that you want to put Sion on that path to becoming invulnerable against this TSM comp. You're not really interested in shutting down Dyrus, since, I mean, he's going to be able to get his cheap items anyway. He's just reliant on casting his ultimate. If he can do that, well, he's done his job. So it's not about that. It's just about getting the Sion ahead, getting him as tanky as possible. If you can get him ahead, you can get more items. And TSM's comp really struggles to deal with that, I think. I think literally unless he stands on Equalizer for the entire duration, TSM won't be able to kill a Sion that's ahead. They can kite him, at least a little bit. Bjergsen might be able to double chains him. That's about the most I expect to get out of it. Alright, they do have a very long range engage, so sieging for TSM will always be hard. So to look for these long range engages, you look for TSM being present in lanes. So either if they siege your tower, or if you just take a tower down, that TSM, they like kind of stand near it, then back off as it dies, then the team finishes as Sion ults. This is the kind of fight you want as well, Elite, because your team, you have so much jump, like between Ezreal, Ahri, Jarvan, they can all get across the screen pretty fast. So you should be able to follow up on it fairly well. Now the other important factor here is the Vi ganks. So the Vi ultimate, it will come out at level 6, obviously. I don't think counter ganking is a possibility, just because I think the LeBlanc Vi damage is just too much. Ari's going to blow up before she can cast her abilities, even if Jarvan's there, and Jarvan will just die too. So I think the best option is for Spirit to get a Sightstone and put wards over ledges that you think Vi is going to Vault Breaker over. So there is a problem with that, though, in that Spirit has normally been getting very tanky. And a Sightstone kind of delays his tankiness a little bit. I mean, it provides a little bit of health, but it's not really a tank item, because it's just not gold efficient for stats. It's just gold efficient for wards. But I think it's worth it to prevent these Vi ganks, which will really get TSM's snowball rolling. I mean, this is that's really the critical moment in the game, I feel, as soon as Centaurion gets his ulti. And it's the point, I think, that make or breaks the game, to be honest. Whether he gets good ults off. Alright, so let's look at TSM's comp. We look at Dyrus on Rumble, Centaurion on Vi, Bjergsen on LeBlanc, Wild Turtle on Sivir, Lustboy on Annie. So TSM have a very level 6 to 11 oriented comp. Whether it's for making picks or engaging a 5v5 teamfight, TSM is good at both with these champions. They do, however, lack scaling, especially for dealing with any full tank, almost no matter what champion it is. Sion on this case. TSM do, however, have strong lanes, but they need to snowball their early power with good map control, with push lanes, in addition to objective control, so World Elite can't trade back efficiently. So the idea is that you have your lanes push when you go for objectives, such that they can't just take an easy tower in response. I mean, this is obviously speaking ideally. It's very hard to actually set that up. But if they can do it, that's what they'd like to do, because they have the advantage in almost every facet through this level 6 to 11 point in the game. So now I think the way that TSM want to play it out is that you should use good pink ward and lens control over the mid lane. This is essential for getting the ball rolling with this comp and to get those good level 6 ganks. As for the bot lane, they should be pushed up as much as possible. Sivir really should be able to shove Ezreal in pretty easily. And the threat of Annie stun should be able to zone a lot more than Janna can. But if they ever do get pushed to their tower, so, I mean, if they recall, for example, and Mystic and Yuzhe decide to stay in lane at the tower, well, if that happens, then they really need to be ready for the flash Annie stun into Sivir ultimate, into Vi ultimate, because that stuff can come out so fast through the lane, and this can be so devastating. If you can kill Janna before she monsoons, that's probably a double kill. So that's something they need to be aware of, both teams. In the top lane, I think Rumble, he'll be pushed to tower. He can't really deal with Sion. He doesn't really have the damage early in the game until he's got his items to burn through Sion's shield and sustain through the poke that Sion puts out. Rumble can actually just get kited in that lane by a melee champion, funnily enough, and still get out-damaged. So I would largely leave him to fend for himself, though. I don't think Centaurion could get much from ganking that lane. And even if they do kill Sion, it doesn't do that much, because it allows Rumble to hit his power spike maybe a minute earlier, maybe even earlier than that, but I really don't think that's that big of a deal. And if there is a counter gank, you're going to expend so much trying to kill Sion, and he's going to deal a lot of damage in response, and I mean, even with his passive, and I think that will get turned around pretty easily. So I would stay away from top lane if I was Centaurion. I think the best option is just to react on the other side of the map. You don't worry about Rumble. I mean, he'll get the items he needs, and he relies a lot more on just having a well-placed ultimate than actually having more items. Okay, so once TSM have this snowball going, I think they're fairly reliant on it. They should look for flanks in the jungle. So what I mean by flanks in the jungle is that they want to look to catch World Elite rotating between the towers to catch farm. If they aren't rotating through their own jungle, then TSM will simply be able to out-rotate them. as one person pushes the lane, and the rest of TSM just collapse on the tower when the wave arrives. So, it's very, very simple thing in strategy games where you control the middle of the map. Okay, I mean, my expertise is in chess. There's a very obvious example. You control the center of the map, you can get to all parts of the map faster. So if you control the bot side of the jungle, you're on red side. You control the enemy's bot red jungle. The red buff area of the jungle, that is. Then you can rotate between their mid and bot lanes fairly easily. And if they can't use their jungle to access their lanes, they will be slower to rotate. So you will have the advantage when pushing these lanes in particular. Okay, that's about as deep as I'll go into the strategies for each comp, so I'll just give a little bit of a summation here. So I think TSM has the better composition, at least in the world of if it's played out perfectly, which it's not a world we live in, but it's nice as an analyst to at least think about this. I just think that they would have too big of a lead with such domination in the lane and jungle pressure in the bottom half of the map. However, it is noteworthy to say that World Elite have a more forgiving composition, where if the game ever stagnates, their comp should start to take over. So really, my opinion is based on how effectively TSM can execute their composition, like the way I analyzed it and broke it down, versus how much World Elite can slow down the game. So the problem here is that I think the teams are playing the opposite style that they're favored in. That I would say that TSM are a 60-40, and here's why. Based on the analysis of the pick ban phase, I would say TSM have this advantage because typically TSM's games stagnate around the mid game, right? They normally win through sheer team fighting ability. Even in games where they are behind, they can just win just by being a better team fighting comp. Team fighting players. Whereas World Elite have actually looked somewhat weak in this regard, probably because they're a new lineup. I think their team fighting is just not down pat at all. It's looked quite shaky. The way they've normally been winning is through a strong laning phase, really good early game. But they really haven't emphasized it in this pick ban phase. So I just don't think that the comp they've gone with favors their playstyle. Alright, so thanks for listening to my breakdown of this game. Again, if you've got anything you could add, just hit me up on Twitter at @lolworlds. And until my next video, see you then.